Hey, everybody. Appreciate some time today. Thanks for joining us. My name is Justin Crotty. I'm joined by Simon Aldama, our Director of Risk Operations Solutions here at NetRich. And we appreciate a little time today as we ponder some of the challenges and some of the future direction of modern operations, and specifically modern security operations, going forward. So really we're talking to MSSPs and MSPs every day. And we've got a lot of learnings that we've collected through the years in working with MSPs and MSSPs and talking to MSPs and MSSPs, and in our own thinking and thoughts about where the market is headed for MSPs and MSSPs and some of the challenges and ways to overcome those challenges. So we're going to share some thoughts with you today. We're going to give you some insights into what we're seeing in the market. And most importantly, we're going to try to relate some of what we're bringing to the table to MSPs and MSPs and help you think through the next few years in your business and how we might be able to support growth and scale in that business. So first, I'll introduce NetRich. NetRich has been in the risk-aligned operations space for a very long time. We've been serving channel partners, MSPs and MSSPs for well over a decade, and our go-to-market is entirely through the IT channel and service provider partners. We're about 800 employees strong. We're headquartered in San Jose, California, and really our focus is digital operations, both digital IT operations and modern security operations. And we'll talk a little bit about what we're doing, but that's the leading MSPs and MSSPs in the United States. I'm bringing Simon on because Simon is really one of the market leaders as it relates to the evolution of the security market and the evolution of partners' profile in that security market, what we call modern operations. And our definition of modern operations is really, this viewpoint that operations, traditional IT operations, and traditional security operations are coming together. And they're coming together, and modern operations is really this idea of security-led operations in a given enterprise or mid-market company, or the way partners need to think about operations. So this concept that security is really, and Simon's really been at the forefront of this in solutioning for our partners, in talking to our partners, in predicting, in looking at the market and the threats in the market, and really projecting where that market is going. So Simon, thanks for some time today. Really appreciate you being here.
Of course, my pleasure.
A couple of things, Simon, that, obviously we get questions from partners and prospective partners, but I wanted to kind of give you, ask you, what are you seeing in terms of the cybersecurity models out there and the evolution of those models that MSPs and MSSPs should be thinking about as they plot growth in their business?
Now, that's a really good question. I'm glad you asked that. So I would definitely say the evolution of models that the industry has been using to understand the start and finish of where a threat actor plays, it really comes around the MITRE framework. And this has been an evolution from the Lockheed Martin cyber kill chain. And so going into the MITRE framework, or that taxonomy, has been the de facto standard for organizations to understand where they have coverage in terms of controls and telemetry in regards to the tactics across that framework. So really what's been a big goal is just ensuring that you have the proper tactics covered and that you can utilize the identification of gaps in terms of the coverage of those tactics on the MITRE taxonomy you use those gaps and use them as consultative talking points to guide customers into tweaking their technical controls, whether it's physical or technical or tactical, whether that's in the cloud or on-prem. So using that framework, identifying gaps of where you have coverage in the framework, and then of course having consultative conversations to get coverage over those gaps through the tweaking of controls or even the procurement of additional platforms or solutions to get the proper coverage.
So Simon, really what you're saying is if I'm an MSSP or an MSP with security operations, I've deployed a tool set and I'm delivering some level of detection and resolution services to my customers using that tool set. And tool independent, let's just talk about the tool set gets deployed. What we're really talking about here is being able to identify and map the coverage that tool set is providing me against that MITRE framework, and then being able to identify for the client where there might be gaps or lack of coverage or insufficient coverage for specific security behaviors or trends and things like that. Is that a simple way to put it?
It is, and it's a really important point because throughout history, when an organization procures a particular point product, or solution, rarely does that investment get fully utilized in terms of its efficiency and in terms of all the features and functionality that you procured it for. Usually those things are never fully configured, and that leaves gaps in what that investment was supposed to cover. And so being able to have visibility over the lack of configuration of those platforms, really important, because somebody's going to ask at the end of the day, what is my return on security investment for that thing we bought? And getting that visibility outside the vendor's myopic view, really important to identify where you can tweak that investment and get the right coverage to protect against threats.
Interesting. Okay. So let's talk about, kind of the next, and again, you talk to a lot of MSSPs and MSPs across the country every day. And even the most successful providers, struggle with some specific challenges. So in your view, as we are engaging with partners, as we're solutioning for partners, what are the top challenges that MSPs and MSSPs are struggling with in the market today?
Yeah, another great question, Justin. There's quite a few challenges, but I'll talk about the top ones that come to mind. Certainly one of the big challenges is from an MSSP perspective, they're challenged with a particular vendor's telemetry and management system being siloed in terms of that viewpoint that vendor has. So an MSSP may have several vendor supported telemetry lakes. And one of the challenges is they're completely separated, meaning you're going to have to context switch against this particular vendor, the telemetry and the detection coverage they have, switch to another one, and kind of correlate between these siloed vendor solutions. That is a very big problem. And when you have these siloed vendor solutions or these lakes of telemetry, very hard to instantly detect across all of them efficiently and eloquently to provide the customer value, especially when you're monitoring more than one aspect of that large enterprise environment or a suite of business units. So certainly one of the challenges is being able to correlate in real time detections and behaviors across all of those disparate silos very quickly. Very difficult challenge to take on. I would also say an additional challenge is from the economics and the costing around being able to combine these vendor data lakes into one unified data warehouse. Throughout history, we've gone from different data warehousing solutions that came from on-prem and now they're in the cloud. And that data lake warehousing solution continues to evolve and continues to be more economically feasible to put more data in there. So if you have an older school or a legacy method of data warehousing, you might want to rethink how the economics will take place in the next 3 to 5 years as you combine all these different disparate siloed vendor lakes into one major large warehouse. What do the economics look like? And what do the efficiencies look like as you look ahead? Because the data is just going to be larger in volume. And you need to be ready to be able to accommodate much more volumes of data than you're seeing today and do it cost efficiently as you look at different data warehouse solutions to combine these lakes. So that would be another challenge an MSSP is going to have to stay competitive in the market in the next few years. Moving on from that, MSSPs and the industry in general has always been challenged with skill and talent deficiencies to just identify the threats, address them, and again, to provide consultative guidance to customers. And so when you're faced with a talent shortage, you need to operationalize a platform that reduces labor needed to ramp up in terms of the accommodation of additional clients and data. The old school method of adding yet another analyst or 2 or 3 for every customer you onboard, that's not tenable anymore. You need to use automation, artificial intelligence in a way that reduces the need to take on more talent. But another way to look at that is if you are utilizing a platform, again, to look across all these siloed vendor lakes, and you're going to scale that up, if you do have a platform that lends itself to artificial intelligence and automation, additional talent then can help you scale. And that's the goal that we are looking at from an MSSP perspective. So the talent shortage can be alleviated through using a platform that lends itself to take care of that problem inherently. Right off the top of my head, I would say another large challenge for MSSPs is, there's always going to be a threat, and there's always going to be risky behaviors associated with a threat actor. And that's great. However, what really matters is mapping that to a critical asset. So as digital transformation continues to multiply the number of assets an organization has, focusing on the crown jewels and the critical assets that are germane to financial transactions, being able to identify the critical assets, and when there's a threat against that critical asset, then you're focused. But if you're looking at threats and events across assets, but you don't have context around the criticality, that's a waste of time. That's not efficient. So really, a problem that can be addressed with MSSPs is really mapping threats against the asset and the criticality of that asset, because all that matters is the critical assets to stay in business. Whereas, any old asset that isn't part of operations that are critical for tier 1 applications or tier 2 applications, it doesn't matter. You don't need to worry about the impact of the blast radius with that non-critical asset. So that
Yeah,
would be
simply
another.
put, simply put, what you're saying is not all threats are the same against all assets, right? And the
Totally.
threats have to be prioritized based on the asset criticality and the potential impact to an organization.
Absolutely. And if I'm a customer of an MSSP, I have an expectation that you do have some context into my assets and how critical they are so that you can be more efficient to tell me if there's a threat or impact against that tier one application.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So obviously, siloed vendor solutions, as good as those technologies and solutions might be, the challenge comes in managing across an environment that may include one or more of those vendor specific technologies, and being able to ascertain and manage the data coming out of that in a holistic way is difficult. This concept of data lake and warehousing, what we're really talking about is the ingestion of data through these tool stacks, and being able to effectively manage that data, both economically and in terms of being able to leverage that data to identify risk behaviors and things like that. You've got to manage that economics. You've got to manage the ability to do that, closely. Talent deficiencies, say no more. Obviously, the idea of adding people as you grow doesn't make sense. So how do you support more customers with a given staffing level? And then this concept of really, I really think this is interesting, and I'm not sure the market in general does a good job, but how do you prioritize assets in terms of criticality? And then how do you identify and map the threats against those assets, and really, almost in an impact projection, focus and prioritize those most critical assets with the most critical threats against them, deprioritizing all of the lower level stuff that may not be as critical. I think that's really important on workload, on data flow, on everything. So those are all really good points. So look, it's easy to sort of identify, I guess, maybe what some of the core challenges are, right? We've talked to so many partners. The real question is, okay, so what do MSPs and MSSPs do to address these challenges? And how does NetEnrich potentially help not only quantify and lay these out, but also help these partners solve these problems?
Another really, really good question. So, there's a variety of ways to solve these problems. You can either go about it yourself, or you can look at innovative partners who are focused on only solving these problems. And NetEnrich is one of those partners who is highly innovative and has the talent to think about resolving these problems for managed security service providers all day. So what we've done is we've innovated a platform that's really designed for MSSPs and MSPs to scale, and to do so with with not having to hire, like I said in the past, an analyst or two for every customer you bring on. And what we do is through our data warehouse and the way we've designed it economically, we can provide you unified visibility across a variety of different data lakes. And we have unprecedented scale in terms of being able to search through petabyte scale in real time. And we can do that even across up and beyond a whole year of hot indexed data. That's very difficult to do nowadays. So that's one detail that we're able to provide customers in terms of our scale and our visibility across a variety of environments. We also are highly aligned with the MITRE framework or taxonomy to assist everybody involved with where there is coverage in terms of telemetry from the controls and coverage from threat actor tactics, techniques, and sub-techniques that are aligned with the MITRE taxonomy. And this This is a de facto standard that all CISOs and CISOs or CSOs or CIOs expect, because that's a de facto standard to let them know, where I have coverage or not. And we provide that for MSSPs and MSPs. I talked a little bit about that data storage and data warehousing problem. Again, I talked about that before. This is where we really shine in terms of bringing all those lakes together and not waiting for queries to complete. We have that worked out. And again, through petabyte scale, up into a year of hot bucket data, we're able to provide you the answers immediately. And so the last real detail in terms of how we resolve the traditional problems from not having a lot of context around assets and how critical the impact is of this threat against this asset. We have what we call an act-on. An act-on is a highly contextualized next generation ticket that brings different aspects of risk management together. So IT ops, SecOps, NetOps, DevOps, Cloud Ops, and Risk Ops can all together look at this next generation ticket, look at the asset criticality, look at the likelihood, the impact, and the confidence around the threat against the asset. And nobody's going to be pointing fingers as to, oh, well, that's not very important, or no, that asset's not very important. Everybody will have all that information in one workbench to quickly triage and make decisions associated with response. So that's another way NetEnrich has innovated and really fixed that old process that we've seen for years. We reinvented it. And so what's on the screen here, you can see our correlation engine, the way we normalize telemetry, the way we correlate it, the way we classify it in terms of our risk scoring, the way we automate how all of this data and risk scoring comes together, provides and generates this act-on. And it's to be used by any operations team in the MSSP or even at the client to be able to respond faster than they ever have before, because nobody's going to be pointing fingers, right, in terms of what's important or not. So, Justin, any other thoughts around resolution intelligence?
Yeah, so I think this isn't. So again, if I put myself in the shoes or in the position of an MSSP or an MSP, what does this mean? And I've got a tool set that I've deployed. I like my technologies that I'm using. I've got specific vendors that I'm aligned with. All of that I think is fine. I think what we look at is you do have good tooling, good technologies deployed. The problem is your human operations teams are still dealing with a large volume of inbound information that they have to really assess and sort through. And so what we're saying really is resolution intelligence, this platform for modern operations, for modern security operations, ingests the data from those technologies that an MSSP has deployed. It ingests the data from MEDR, it ingests the data from point tools, from vendor-specific platforms. It puts it through AIOps, some automation. It puts it through Google Chronicle, the largest threat hunting database in the world. It's got inbuilt IT operations management capabilities. It's normalizing, it's correlating, it's reducing noise, it's solving some lower end problems automatically, and it's delivering to the operators in the MSSP or the MSP or the end client IT team. It's delivering to them a very clean cut, clear prioritization, impact, criticality sort of scoring or prioritization. And then, I call an act on the recipe to resolve the problem, or things to try to resolve the problem in the form of an act on. So this idea that the complexity is growing to the extent where the human operations teams are really struggling more and more as we go forward. How do we bring visibility and clarity and succinctness and contextualization to the table for them with a clear path to resolution on these issues? And that's really what we're talking about. A big data analytics engine that allows an MSSP to quantify all the data that's being produced by their telemetry and ultimately resolve problems faster, identify and resolve those problems faster. Is that an accurate summary?
Absolutely. Yep.
Well, again, now the next question I always get is, okay, Crotty and Aldama, great, right? What does it look like? How does it work? So maybe you can give us a little bit of a preview of what that looks like from a platform perspective, and we can give these partners a little bit of a view into some of the key capabilities that you highlighted in terms of what we address and what some of the major challenges that they're dealing with.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you. All right. So I'm going to tell a story with this data, and I'll show you the platform as I tell this story. So let's say an analyst comes in to start his or her shift, and that analyst wants to become situationally aware of what's been happening as they are coming back on board and seeing what's going on with the health of their clients that they're monitoring. In this pane right now, and this is a multi-tenant capable platform, we have service providers, partners, and then customers underneath it. Right now, I am looking at this view from the partner view, and I am in the client account at this time. And right now, I'm looking at ingestion health. I'm looking at the telemetry that's been coming in, and I'm looking at the different sources of data that is coming in, from API ingestion, from endpoint to network traffic analysis, to different syslog, you name it. So I'm just going through this, becoming situationally aware of the data that's been happening as I left my shift. And I could see the various trends of the telemetry coming through for this particular client. As I move forward, I'm also looking at behaviors that are aligned with the MITRE framework and the cyber kill chain here. So on the left, you have behaviors that are associated with recon and initial footholds. Whereas as we move to the left, we have more critical behaviors or threatening behaviors that have been occurring in the client's environment. So you can see we have
Simon, real quick, when you talk about kill chain, really what we're talking about here is this is the general route to an asset and the behaviors and exploitations that a threat actor would execute in a given environment. And it's based on MITRE taxonomy, but it says, look, a typical threat actor will behave in a fairly specific pattern to probe and to exploit weaknesses in an environment. So you're mapping, when you talk about kill chain, you're mapping, to a MITRE identified path in which a threat actor will typically sniff around, probe, and ultimately exploit weaknesses in a given environment.
That's correct. That's correct. And we feel this behavioral view mapped to the cyber kill chain and the MITRE framework. This is the new way of really looking at vast amounts of data, not looking at individual events like an older school tier 1 SOC analyst would. So from here, we can immediately see if we have patterns of behavior that really show that we have data leaving the environment. And being able to identify this very quickly is germane to the SLAs that are between the client and the managed service providers. So as I also go through my shift, I'm looking at different matches of indications of compromise inside the data lake, from malware to scanning, to things that definitely should not be happening within the client environment. This really makes me situationally aware of what's been going on so that I can have a good idea of kind of how I'm going to tweak my analysis to identify, critical behaviors that we need to notify the client of. And so as I go through this data, I'm looking at detections over time. And again, I'm just becoming situationally aware of what's been going on. You can see that we're highly mapped to MITRE. You're going to see that as a trend throughout our platform. As I continue, I'm also looking at the current coverage I have of tactics threat actors will take based on the detection rules. We have matching patterns in the telemetry within the data lake. So this is very helpful when you have a particular threat actor that uses certain tactics, techniques, and sub-techniques. And you may see that on the news, or you may see that through your threat intelligence, and you immediately want to understand, okay, we have a threat actor trying to subvert energy companies. Our particular energy company has this coverage currently with the telemetry that they're sending us. And what's really, really powerful here, as an example, is as an analyst working with a client, I can immediately understand the techniques and the mitigations that I need to have through a consultative conversation to assist them to tweak their controls in a way that provides that coverage against those threat actors and their techniques. So our platform does that for you and really enables the MSSP to take care consultatively client issues that the client may not be aware of, right? Because clearly they're outsourcing the service to the MSSP. So this is another way we provide coverage and visibility on the taxonomy, based on the telemetry that we have coming in.
Yeah, this is really important, I think, and a really interesting view into data that's already being produced by the telemetry that an MSSP has deployed. But how often is that data mapped to this type of coverage model and give the MSSP or the MSP the ability to go back and consult with the client against specific threats or specific exploitative processes that they may not be well protected with, and have the opportunity to upsell, cross-sell, or tweak those coverages to get them where they need to be. I think this is a really good view of that.
Yeah, we agree. It's very helpful. More on the platform, as you identify risky behaviors and you identify there is a particular one that really you want to dive into, what that does is that takes you to our workbench. This is the Acton. This is the centralized area where all your operations group are going to come together and assess the next steps in terms of response. So in this workbench, when we start from the left-hand side, we're looking at the criticality, and we're looking at, we have multiple behaviors on this particular asset, okay? We have comments that the team has been putting in to provide additional context to the analyst as I look through this. And what's really important here is really understanding the likelihood, the impact, and the competence around the scoring of threats against this asset. So the likelihood really is around, events and exposures, and the impact is really, I would say, how big of an impact does this behavior have? And competence really is around, what is the probability that the threat is actually causing an impact? So when we look at likelihood, the reason why we're scoring high is because we've identified these behaviors, and again, mapped to the MITRE taxonomy. We've identified these behaviors in our endpoint telemetry and our network telemetry. So we have execution, persistence, and then now we have exfiltration. Very important to understand, and again, it's against this asset. When we look at impact, we're scoring as to if this asset is subverted, what is the impact, what is the blast radius? And it is definitely high because we have set the criticality of this asset in this area here of our interface. This is where we would add tags, we would set the criticality, or we would mark the asset as crown jewel. So we have a separate part of our interface that you can set the criticality of this asset, which helps in our scoring. Now, while you're here, if you want to immediately dive in to Google Chronicle, you can. We have an identity provider that puts the analyst right into the Google Chronicle tenant, where we have asset identification here. And again, across a petabyte of data, up to a year of hot bucket, we can immediately get insights in real time around the prevalence, around that asset, and identify if these behaviors have been used around other assets within the environment. So really important point that you can immediately dive in right into the tenant and start more lower level technical threat hunting if need be.
So really, Simon, if I look at this prioritization, I think this is also a really critical issue. Again, how do I determine the largest threats? How do I determine the most potential severe impact?
Right.
And how do I organize obviously the limited workloads that I have in terms of human operators and intelligent human beings that are doing this? How do I help them prioritize their approach every day to neutralize the largest potential threats and the most significant impact first? Right? We're not saying there aren't other issues, but we're prioritizing them such that with limited time, and if you want to respond to the most potential impact first, and then move your way down the chain. This is a really good way to organize the actual labor activities of that security operations team in a most impactful manner. Would that be accurate?
Absolutely. Like I said, this workbench enables all ops teams to get the context they need to work together and respond together, rather than having an inefficient process of calling different lines of business owners or engineers, at the client site. Hey, what is this asset again? Or, hey, I don't have enough information. Is this really critical? All of those questions are answered here in this workbench. Yeah. So other aspects of this workbench that are pretty important for people to gain critical knowledge is the evidence. We have malware, and we have an interesting domain that was used as evidence against this particular asset. And we also have additional entities, which again are searchable immediately inside of Google Chronicle if you want to see additional details or indications of compromise against those entities. And from a detection perspective, again, we're mapping to the tactics and the techniques of MITRE ATT&CK. And this is where all of the detections are organized in one place so that you can actually see a timeline of when things happened and really become more aware of details that you need to know to assist with your triage and response. We also have the capability of you identifying and looking at all of this information from a graph perspective, where you can see the alerts, the tactics, and the actual asset that is in question. Really good way to kind of visualize what's kind of going on. And I know I've talked a lot about reducing labor and having a more efficient process to get away from looking at individual alerts or events and validating the details of those events. Well, we take care of that for you here with our automation. And this screen, this is where a lot of automation happens in terms of validating all the details to ensure that the accuracy of the context within this workbench is where it needs to be. So all the little tasks a SOC 1, a layer 1 or L1 SOC analyst would perform, we do that automatically on our back end. And so this really expedites and speeds up decision making that you would need to do around threats against a critical asset. The final thing I would speak to is, I would say, we have a virtual war room here where we can add participants from different operational groups or vendors or whoever needs to be involved to triage quickly together and work together as one cohesive team to respond to that SLA that we have to with our client. So this is a high-level demo. If you need a more in-depth technical overview, we're always available to do so. But this is, I would say, the general look and feel of our workbench and our automation that really lends itself to scale in ways that MSSPs have not been able to scale in the past. So that would be the end of our kind of preview here. Justin, back to you.
Really interesting. And again, I think it's important for potential partners. If you look at those challenges that we discussed and any of those that are potentially relevant to those who are watching this, come talk to us. Come understand what that data ingestion looks like. Come understand some of the key feature sets, how they're aligned against common service provider problems out there. This was built with a service provider in mind. This was built with operations in mind. Where our history is operations, both traditional IT operations and security operations. So this was built with a multi-tenant partner universe in mind to be leveraged by partners in supporting end clients and any operations teams that may exist in the clients you're supporting. Again, the key features are, ingestion of data at low cost, threat hunting at Google bare metal scale, quickly and efficiently. This idea of an act-on, fully contextualized, correlated, prioritized, both in terms of impact and probability, to give your operations teams a good sense of what to prioritize and how to reduce the risk. Complete dashboards and insights. We talked about the mapping to the MITRE attack framework and some of the kill chain behaviors we see, and then this concept of advanced threat analytics capabilities, and the ability to be able to articulate to a client the value and the types of threats and how those threats are being identified, remediated, and more importantly, how their coverage stacks up against future threats or evolving threats, and how to button down the hatches, so to speak, for those clients. So there's a lot of great value here that you didn't see. But again, if you're having, if this is of interest and you want to talk to us, I would encourage you to reach out to either Simon or myself. Our contact information is on the screen there. More information can be found at netenrich.com. And we'd love to have a conversation with you, even if it's just to help you understand what we're seeing in the market, some tips and tricks that our threat hunters or our security teams are seeing, or if it's to take a look at your telemetry stack and help you find ways to be more effective and efficient. We'd love to have a conversation with you. We appreciate your time. Simon, thank you for joining us. Always good to talk to you. I always learn something when we present some content like this. I hope it was beneficial to those that were watching. And again, if you have any questions or are curious and would like to have an additional conversation, please reach out. Thanks and have a great day.